Some breaking news. President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin just ended their phone call about a potential ceasefire in Ukraine. We are told the two leaders spoke for at least an hour and a half. Now, President Trump has said in recent days the call was expected to cover Russia and Ukraine dividing up certain assets. That would include a contentious proposal allowing Russia to keep control of the Zaporizhzhia power plant, the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. President Trump seeming confident last night that a deal could be reached.
But it's a bad situation in Russia, and it's a bad situation in Ukraine. What's happening in Ukraine is not good, but we're going to see if we can work a peace agreement, a ceasefire and peace, and I think we'll be able to do it.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelensky has accused President Putin of dragging out the war to gain more concessions. Let's go right to NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons, who's joining us from inside Russia in the Kursk region, which is a place where Ukraine had initially made some inroads and then has since been forced out of that territory. Keir, what do we know about this phone call? Any details yet?
None yet. I mean, we do hear from a White House official speaking to our own Peter Alexander that the call is over, that it took around 90 minutes. That's not as long as a phone call as you might think, because keep in mind that any call between an American president and the Russian president includes translation. There is lots of reporting about the kinds of things the Trump administration might be agreeing to. Issues that are likely to raise concern in Ukraine and many European capitals, questions about Ukraine's ability to defend itself, about its territory, as you mentioned, about power plants. So it's going to be contentious, a lot of it, and there's a long way to go with questions about exactly what, for example, European allies might have to say about anything the Trump administration might be signing up to with the Kremlin. As you say, we're here in Kursk, and this is a region that was held by the Ukrainians for 7 months. They've now been largely pushed back, apart from a slither along the border. We went to a village where there was intense fighting, and parts of which were held by the Ukrainians during that incursion. We spoke to one military volunteer, a Russian, and if you want to ask the question, should there be a ceasefire? Do people want a ceasefire here in Russia, as well as, of course, in Ukraine? Well, the answer is yes, many are tired of it. Take a listen.
We have never been supporters of military actions. Why? Because any war is not romantic. It is death. No values are worth human life. And we understand this perfectly well. And we're all for any opportunity to stop actions, combat. Why? Because neither Ukrainians, nor we, nor the West, nor America need it. No one needs it. Any war is the loss of lives of worthy citizens of their country.
Of course, many Russians have been supportive of military action, and it was President Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine that began this war. Now the question is he getting many of the things he has wanted for so long in exchange for agreeing to a ceasefire?
Keir Simmons, thank you very much for your reporting. We're all awaiting any kind of readout from this call. In the meantime, let's bring in Ambassador Michael Carpenter. He's the former National Security Council Senior Director for Europe. Ambassador, thanks for joining us. President Trump trying to close the deal on that 30-day ceasefire proposal agreed to by Ukraine last week in Saudi Arabia. Can this be achieved in one phone call?
Well, this is going to be a big litmus test of whether Putin is serious about doing a deal with President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. I suspect that there will be conditions attached to any kind of ceasefire if, in fact, Putin agrees to it. And that's a big if. We don't know whether he will back off from some of his maximalist demands, at least in the near term. But in the longer term, Putin insists on getting 5 regions of Ukraine ceded to Russia and wants to militarily cap Ukraine's potential over the long term, prevent it from entering NATO. He has not shown that he's willing to back off one iota from those demands. And so now we sort of see the tactics of whether Putin wants to maintain the good graces of the Trump administration by appearing to show that he's being constructive, Or is he going to attach conditions even for a 30-day ceasefire? That's the question.
As we await any kind of details from this phone call, we do know Putin had floated some conditions that he would agree to a ceasefire only if it leads to long-term peace. And he hinted that would mean barring Ukraine from receiving military aid or mobilizing new forces. He wants Ukraine to give Russia the regions they're currently occupying. He wants guarantees that Ukraine will not join NATO. Should President Trump push back on those demands? How would he go about that?
Absolutely. I mean, this would be undermining all of the principles of the UN Charter, the Helsinki Final Act, and so many other documents that the United States and Russia and so many other countries have signed together. It would be essentially legitimizing the use of force to violate an international border, invade a neighboring country, and then take 5 regions of that country away from it for no reason. It would be as if an adversary of the United States came, invaded our country, and occupied 5 U.S. states and demanded that they be ceded to that foreign power. And don't forget that for Ukrainians as well, this is not just a war about a sliver of territory. It is, from their perspective, a genocidal war because Ukrainians are being punished for speaking Ukrainian, for having a Ukrainian identity. And the Russians, for their part, have instituted this far-flung system of what they call filtration camps, where Ukrainians are tortured, where they're killed, where they're raped in large numbers, precisely because of their Ukrainian identity. So President Zelensky is not going to agree to some of these demands from Putin just because the U.S. president presents that as the way to end this war.
Michael Carpenter, we appreciate your insights and expertise. Thanks for joining us. And we'll, of course, keep everybody updated should we learn more about that phone call between the two leaders.